Some families look perfect from the outside, smiling faces at Sunday dinners, laughter spilling through the windows, a home that seems unshakable. But perfection is the easiest mask to wear and the hardest to keep from slipping. What happens when the people you trust most are the ones who destroy you? This is the story of one family's downfall, a week that turned love into betrayal, safety into danger, and a father into something far more terrifying than a protector. This is True Crimes Altar, where every sin is punished, every betrayal has a cost, and every soul must answer to the truth. Like, comment, and subscribe, because these are the stories the guilty prayed would stay buried. The Hayes home stood like a postcard image of everything a tight-knit family could be: warm, steady, and proud. It was a spacious two-story house in the Eastwood Terrace neighborhood of Brookford, lined with flowering hedges and guarded by a white picket fence that had been there longer than most of the neighbors. Leonard Hayes, 45, was the eldest of four brothers and the rock everyone leaned on. He'd clawed his way up from almost nothing. His father had worked a factory line, and his mother had been a schoolteacher. From both, he learned discipline and grit. By his early 30s, Leonard had built a thriving freight company with his brothers at his side. Together, they didn't just create a business, they built a family legacy. Leonard married Marvette when he was 26. She was a gentle, quick-to-laugh nurse with a fierce moral compass and a gift for caring for people. They had one child together, a daughter named Betrayal. She was their whole world, beautiful, smart, and soft-spoken, with a quiet determination that had just carried her into her 19th year. Leonard was protective, but never smothering. Marvette taught her daughter to know her worth, guard her boundaries, and carry herself with dignity. Betrayal was their pride. Under one roof lived Leonard, Marvette, Betrayal, and Leonard's three younger brothers, Daryl, 39, Terrence, 37, and Calvin, 35, each with their own wives and kids. It was a big, often noisy household, but there was love in the chaos. Sunday brunches overflowed with laughter. Summer nights meant domino games on the patio. Birthdays felt like neighborhood festivals. The Hayes house had become a vault of shared memories. To her uncles, Betrayal was the jewel of the family. Daryl had called her Little Sunbeam since she was a toddler, sneaking out at night to watch the stars. Terrence would stay up late helping her untangle tough college assignments. Calvin had a ritual of bringing her warm peach turnovers every Friday after work. From the outside, the Hayeses looked like the definition of unity. But appearances are often just a cover. Beneath the warmth, the first signs of a storm had begun to stir. The shift began quietly, like the faintest breeze before a storm. In early April, the family received an invitation to a cousin's destination wedding in Crestford, North Carolina, a week-long affair packed with events. Marvette was already matching dresses to shoes while Leonard planned the trip like he was leading a convoy. But Betrayal's final board exams were scheduled for the exact same week. She was dedicated to her studies and had no intention of missing them. She insisted she'd stay home and study in peace. Marvette hesitated, but Leonard reassured her. "She's not a little girl anymore," he told her, resting a steady hand on her shoulder. "She's focused, disciplined. We're just a phone call away." By coincidence, Daryl, Terrence, and Calvin also stayed behind. Work at the company was pressing, and they offered to keep things running while Leonard was gone. Nobody thought twice about it. Daryl even told Leonard, "I'll check on her, man. Like she's mine." Leonard believed him. Why wouldn't he? Before leaving, Marvette cooked enough food to last days and filled the fridge with Betrayal's favorites: pasta salad, baked tilapia, lemon rice, and slices of sweet potato pie. She hugged Betrayal tight at the door. "Keep the doors locked. No late nights. And call me before you go to bed." Betrayal smiled, nodded, and promised. Leonard handed her some emergency cash, kissed her on the forehead, and walked out with his suitcase and a sense of fatherly pride. As the family car pulled away, Betrayal stood on the porch, waving. Upstairs, Daryl watched from the window, his expression unreadable. That was the last day the Hayes household would feel normal. For the first few days, nothing seemed unusual. Betrayal kept her head in her books, occasionally going for short walks. Daryl and his brothers returned from work late, or so it seemed. Polite small talk was exchanged at meals. The air carried a faint, unspoken shift, but it was quiet enough to ignore. The house felt different, not in how it looked, but in its silence. With the wedding pulling most of the family away, the constant chatter had been replaced by stillness. The once busy kitchen was no longer filled with clanging dishes and Marvette's humming. The television in the living room played muted news reruns for hours. Only the sound of Brielle's footsteps or a door creaking upstairs broke the calm. She kept to her room or the rooftop terrace, eyes on her textbooks and her future. But even the strongest routines can buckle when the usual rhythm is broken. On the second day, something happened. Small on the surface, almost forgettable, except it shifted everything. Brielle had just come home from an exam, drained from hours of writing. She stepped into a hot shower, changed into an oversized t-shirt, and left the bathroom door cracked to let the steam escape. She didn't hear Daryl coming upstairs, returning earlier than usual to grab a phone charger he'd left in the guest room. Without thinking, he pushed the half-closed door open and froze. Brielle, wrapped in a towel, turned abruptly. Their eyes locked. For a split second, neither moved. She clutched the towel tighter. "Uncle Daryl!" she shouted. Daryl's face drained of color. "My bad," he mumbled, slipping out quickly. Brielle slammed the door, heart racing. She told herself it had to be an accident. At least she hoped it was. But something about the way his eyes lingered before he left made her uneasy. She brushed it off that night. Maybe it really was a mistake. But the next morning at breakfast, she caught him looking again, not openly, but enough for her to notice. That day, in the kitchen, she felt his gaze from the hallway without even turning around. The unease grew. Days passed. Daryl never repeated the intrusion, but his tone became softer, his questions oddly personal, his offers to help more frequent. The afternoon Brielle completed her final exam. She came home feeling light for the first time in weeks. She dropped her bag on the couch and let out a deep breath. Daryl, who had arrived earlier than usual, emerged from the kitchen holding a glass half filled with wine. "So, you're done?" he asked. "Yep," Brielle replied with a small smile, not sensing the slow tension threading its way into the air. Daryl's expression wasn't that of a watchful uncle. It was something else entirely. He raised his glass. "We should toast to that." Brielle laughed awkwardly. "I don't think I'm supposed to drink." "You're 19, he said, handing her the glass. "One sip won't hurt." She hesitated. He always had a way of making things sound casual, harmless. "Just one," she said. But one turned into two, and two into three. They moved from the kitchen to the living room, the conversation loosening with every pour. They joked about professors, childhood mishaps, even how strict Leonard had been when she was little. Then the tone shifted. Daryl brought up the day he'd walked in on her by accident. Brielle's nervous laugh didn't mask her discomfort. "Let's not talk about that." "I can't forget it," he murmured, leaning closer. "That image still stuck in my mind." She stared at him. "Uncle, don't call me that right now," he whispered. Her chest tightened. She should have gotten up, should have walked away, but the wine made her slower, her thoughts hazy. Somewhere in the confusion, she didn't recoil completely, and that scared her. "I knew you were looking at me differently since then," she said quietly. "I tried not to," he answered. "But I couldn't." "What do you want?" she asked. Daryl's voice dropped. "I want to see you like that again." Her hand shook. Her heart pounded. Slowly, almost as if testing reality, she lifted the hem of her t-shirt just an inch. Daryl's breath caught, and in that moment, the line was crossed. What followed wasn't love or romance. It was something warped, born from vulnerability, misplaced trust, and manipulation. They ended up in bed together. There was no beauty in it, only something wrong and silent. The next morning, Brielle woke first, naked under a blanket, her body aching, not with warmth, but with confusion and shame. Daryl slept beside her. She dressed quickly and locked herself in the bathroom for hours, shivering. Later, Daryl came knocking. He wasn't harsh or blaming. He reassured her, said they were both lonely, that they needed each other, that it was their secret. Somehow, she agreed. What began as a single, terrible mistake became something repeated. The next time, it was planned. Daryl would come home early, pretend to work in the study, and when the house was quiet, they'd disappear into each other. A week later, the secret wasn't his alone. One afternoon, Terrence returned early and found them together. His voice exploded through the room. "What is this?" Brielle froze, heat rushing to her face. Daryl stumbled for words. Then Calvin walked in, drawn by the shouting, and saw for himself. The air turned heavy. "We're telling Leonard," Terrence said sharply. "No, please," Brielle begged. "Don't. I'll do anything. Just don't tear this family apart." Those words, "I'll do anything," hung in the air like a trap. Calvin looked at Terrence, and something in his eyes shifted. It wasn't forgiveness. It was temptation. Within hours, Terrence and Calvin were part of the secret. The shame twisted into something darker. The three uncles, once her protectors, became predators. Brielle, once the light of the family, became the shared secret they guarded in silence. It wasn't love. It wasn't desire. It was control. By the end of that seventh day, the Hayes home's warmth had been replaced with something cold and unspoken. But cameras don't hide the truth forever, and soon, what they thought was buried would ignite a fire none of them could escape.
If you're enjoying this video, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. Share and like this video. It's free and won't cost anything, but it helps and encourages us to grow and do more. Thank you for your kindness, and back to the video.
The days that followed were wrapped in a thick, oppressive quiet. It wasn't just the absence of noise. It was the kind of silence that seeps into your bones, where every floorboard creak and ticking clock feels amplified. Brielle stopped sleeping in her own room, not because she lacked one, but because it no longer felt like hers. The posters, the pinned-up college goals, the photos of her with friends, none of it felt connected to the person she'd become over the last week. Daryl walked the halls now with a smug confidence, whispering suggestive comments when no one else was around, brushing his hand against her waist in the kitchen, staring too long across the table. Terrence was more calculated. He'd sit beside her at family meals, his hand motionless on her knee under the table, while chatting casually with others. He told her this was a need they all shared, that she was holding the family together. Calvin barely spoke at all, but when it was his turn to call her to his room, she went, reluctantly, shamefully, because avoiding it seemed harder than facing them. One evening, Daryl appeared at her door holding a USB drive and wearing a sly smile. "Got a surprise for you," he said. She barely looked up. "I don't want surprises." He came in anyway, sat at the foot of her bed, and plugged the drive into her laptop. "I recorded it," he whispered. "Recorded what?" she asked, dread creeping in. "That night. The one when all of us were there. I wanted to keep it." Her blood went cold. "Delete it," she demanded. But he didn't. He opened the folder, and the screen lit up with a grainy video. Shadows, sheets, voices. Brielle's body. Terrence's voice. Calvin's back. Daryl's laugh. Brielle slammed the laptop shut. "Delete it," she screamed. Daryl just shrugged. "It's just for us. Nobody else will see it." She cried harder than she ever had. The shame felt like it had seeped past her skin and into her bones. She began avoiding all three, locking her door, skipping meals, refusing to answer when they called her name. They didn't force their way in, but they used guilt like a weapon. "You're acting like we're strangers," Calvin said one morning. "We're all in this together," Terrence murmured over breakfast. Even Daryl softened his tone. "We're all hurting," he told her. "You just show it louder." But cracks were forming in them too. Terrence grew paranoid, checking the USB multiple times a day and making backup copies on his phone just in case. Calvin started drinking heavily, wine at dinner, whiskey by midnight, another glass before dawn. Daryl kept replaying the video late at night, eyes locked on the screen, as if it was the last thread holding his connection to Brielle, until one night, drunk, he passed out with the video still looping on his phone. That was the night Leonard returned. The wedding had ended a day early. Marvette and the rest of the family were coming back in the morning, but Leonard had business to handle and drove back overnight. He stepped quietly into the living room, where he found Daryl asleep on the couch, a tipped-over bottle beside him. Leonard reached to turn off the phone, but froze when he noticed faint movement on the screen. Curiosity turned to confusion, then to horror. It was Brielle, his daughter, naked, surrounded by his brothers. Leonard's breath caught. The phone slipped from his hand onto the carpet. For what felt like forever, he sat frozen, staring at nothing. Then, without a word, he picked up the phone, transferred the file to his own device, and wiped his tears. Upstairs, Brielle slept, unaware. He stood in her doorway, watching her the way a father watches his child for the last time, love tangled with devastation. The next morning, Leonard called Brielle downstairs. "Got a surprise for you," he said with a smile that didn't touch his eyes. Then he phoned his brothers. "Meet me at Cedar Pines Retreat. Brielle finished her exams. I want to celebrate." They agreed, not knowing they were walking toward their reckoning. Cedar Pines Retreat sat 10 kilometers outside Brookford, hidden behind tall pines and usually reserved for family celebrations, birthdays, anniversaries, summer getaways. On this morning, it would become something else entirely. Leonard arrived first with Brielle. He hadn't slept a single minute. His mind was cold and still, his expression unreadable. Brielle followed him in, still half asleep and puzzled by his sudden burst of energy. "Why are we here so early?" she asked. "You finished your exams," he said. "I thought you deserved something special. Just us and a few close ones." He had bought a chocolate cake, her favorite, along with balloons and paper plates. The picture was disturbingly normal. Brielle sat at the dining table while Leonard busied himself in the small kitchen area, making tea. His hand trembled when it reached for the spoon. She thought maybe he was just emotional, proud of her. She didn't know he had seen the video. She didn't know what was coming. At 10 a.m., Daryl arrived first, then Calvin, then Terrence. They came in joking about the drive, about the crisp morning air, about how Leonard was doing the most with this celebration. Leonard let them settle before calling everyone into the living room. Without a word, he plugged his phone into the TV. The first video file appeared on the screen. In an instant, the laughter died. Brielle's face flashed across the display, bare, exposed, followed by Terrence's voice, Calvin's hand, Daryl's laugh. The three uncles froze. Brielle stared, confused for the first 2 seconds, before all color drained from her face. "Dad, wait. You did this to her," Leonard cut in, his voice trembling with rage. "It's not what it looks like," Daryl stammered. "Don't you dare call me brother," Leonard snapped. "You don't get to use that word." Terrence stepped forward, panic edging into his tone. "We were drunk that first time. It just happened. She begged us not to tell you," Calvin blurted out. "We thought it was a one-time mistake." Leonard's eyes narrowed. "She begged you, and you decided to make her your secret, to keep doing this for weeks, and to record it." He turned to Brielle. "And you let them do this to you." Brielle's knees buckled. She dropped to the floor, tears spilling fast. "I didn't know how to stop it, Dad. I thought they'd tell you. I thought," her voice cracked, "I thought it was love. Then I thought it was punishment. Then I just stopped thinking." Her sobs echoed off the walls. Leonard didn't speak. He walked to a wooden cabinet in the corner, opened the bottom drawer, and pulled out a silver 9mm pistol he kept for protection. The sunlight caught the metal, making it shine like something final. "Please, Leonard," Terrence whispered, stepping back. "We're family." "You're monsters," Leonard said, his voice low, steady. Then, bang. Terrence fell instantly. Bang. Calvin dropped next, gasping, his shirt blooming with red. Daryl bolted for the door. "Please, please," he cried, tripping over the rug. "I'll confess, You'll rot in hell," Leonard said. Bang! Daryl's body hit the floor. Brielle screamed from the corner, covering her ears, shaking violently. Her entire world had been destroyed in seconds. Leonard turned to her. The father, the protector, the executioner. She looked up through tears, pleading. "Please, I'm your daughter. You were my daughter, he said, his voice breaking. I made a mistake, she cried. I didn't ask for it. They broke me, Dad, every day. Leonard's hand trembled. I wish I could unsee it, he whispered. But I can't. She crawled toward him. Let me fix this. Don't become like them. Tears streamed down his face. He dropped to his knees, the gun hanging at his side. For a moment, it seemed he might let her live. Then, as if the weight of it all snapped something inside, he stood again, raised the gun. No, Brielle screamed. Bang! The shot echoed longer this time. She slumped to the floor, her final tears still on her cheeks. The room fell into silence, broken only by Leonard's sobs. He walked outside, unsteady, eyes distant. He looked at the sky, the trees, the birds overhead, as if the world hadn't just ended. Slowly, he picked up his phone and called Marvette. When she answered, cheerful and expecting good news, his voice cracked. They're gone. What? Who? All of them, he said. I saw the video. I had to. I had to. The phone slipped from her hands as she collapsed on the kitchen floor, screaming. An hour later, the police arrived. Leonard stood at the gate, the pistol unloaded on the ground. He didn't resist. He didn't speak. He only cried. The trial lasted 4 months. His defense attorney argued he'd suffered a trauma-induced break after seeing evidence of incestuous abuse and the recording of his daughter by his brothers. The jury was shown the video. Many wept. Marvette testified through tears, calling Leonard a good man who snapped. Experts weighed in. The media swarmed. Public opinion split. Some called him a hero. Others said he was a murderer who should never walk free. Brielle's past was dissected in court, debated in living rooms. Was she manipulated, or did she consent? But no matter the argument, she had died broken. At sentencing, Leonard stood and spoke. I wasn't a father that day. I was a storm. My failure wasn't pulling the trigger. My failure was not protecting her before it was too late. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Marvette sold the house, unable to walk its halls. She moved to another city, took work counseling grieving parents, and never remarried. The Hayes family, once an example of unity, became a cautionary tale whispered in hushed voices. No tombstones were placed, no funerals held, only a silent retreat in the woods, its walls still echoing with the sound of a father's final heartbreak. And the name Leonard Hayes would forever haunt the justice system, not just as a killer, but as a man who became his own judgment day. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and like this video for more true crime stories. Don't forget to leave your thoughts and theories in the comments section below. Stay safe and see you in the next video.